You better stop crying, or I'll give you something to cry about. Big boys don't cry, and today we're talking about the wounding and the healing of the male heart. Advanced warning, this is going to be an extremely sensitive video. I'm going to be bringing up material which is likely to tap into childhood trauma and unresolved romantic relational conflict, because I have dealt with this issue with almost every male client that I've worked with, and I personally could not cry for years, and it doesn't take much backwards reflection to realize why men do not feel comfortable opening up, because it will never work to say that men should just be more vulnerable when they have got 1, 2, 3, or maybe multiple decades of experience of being punished for their vulnerability. This is the little boy who was physically or emotionally attacked for his sadness. This is the grown man who took a risk to be honest with his emotions with his romantic partner and was met with betrayal or jealousy or even mocking anger. It's a really, really difficult topic to talk into, but hopefully today we can have a conversation specifically for men and the male healing journey, but also for women to learn how to support their men in the places that hurt the most, because it's not about vulnerability, it's about having the courage to be honest about our emotions, but it's not as simple as opening up to anyone who would ask us to. Most men have had the experience of being asked to open up and then being punished either directly or indirectly. I have felt this myself several times in romantic relationships. I've felt it in my family story, and my friends and my clients have also felt the same pattern. It's sharing with courage and being met with punishment. Sometimes that's very subtle. Sometimes it's a withdrawal of love. You may have a girlfriend that says, "You can tell me anything," and then you tell them just how dark it is inside of your heart, and they withdraw because they don't know what to do with it. Or you tell her the anger, you let her see how furious you are that your boss has done something that pisses you off, or maybe a pattern of yours like drinking or smoking is getting under your skin and you need to break through, but it comes out as anger, not towards her, but the anger in the space, and she recoils because it's literally scary. She can't handle the male shadow. So you did your best to open up, but she couldn't hold the space. And sometimes we go to therapists and they can't hold the space. Sometimes we go to family members. They want nothing to do with it, and eventually, layer by layer by layer, the male heart becomes congealed and solidified, and in your 40s or your 50s, you will get a heart attack. That's why it happens then. It is not just a medical anomaly. There is such a thing as constricting the heart and losing the ability to cry. But let's frame today's video with a wonderful psychologically deep question, I think from Will. I'll bring it up on the screen, put it over my face. It's quite a long comment, but bear with me, it's a wonderful framing. So Will asked a question, and pardon me if I misspeak or misheard. I believe you mentioned in a prior video that you had an inability or aversion to crying. Can you expand on that at some point in the video in the future? I personally went decades without being able to shed a tear, even when faced with moments of extreme sadness and grief. It wasn't until one very specific therapy session in recent years which seemed to trigger an opening of the floodgates and one of the most cathartic releases I've ever felt. I've since returned to a rather stoic outwards presentation, but no longer feel I am incapable of that act. Would it be great to hear your perspective on topics such as, is crying healthy? Or better yet, is the inability to cry unhealthy? What does it say about someone who can't cry? Is this a trauma response or something else? What does it say about someone who cries too much, etc.? Excellent question. Ultimately, yes, if a man does not cry, there are only so many years where he can hold on to that well of unexpressed tears and not eventually be consumed in the sadness. And he may be able to paddle above the water for a few decades, but eventually he is going to drown within the unexpressed grief, or it's going to show up as something like a heart attack or cancer, back spasms, some kind of like blocking of their mind. Maybe they get fogging, maybe they get dementia. There's many, many ways that unexpressed grief can become a physical disease. It is truly unhealthy to not be able to cry. But how do you go from repressed male tears to healthy male tears? How can we know as men, when is this a safe moment? When is this person safe enough for me to have the courage to be honest about how I truly feel? To be honest that I haven't got it figured out? To be honest that I don't have the answer all the time? And to be honest, although I feel strong in my leadership in this area of my life and my courage in this other area of my life, in this particular vulnerable place that I can't quite reach, I need a little bit of support. My number one indication and number one suggestion towards how to see the pattern and then move beyond the pattern is to find a space to therapeutically self-cleanse. And this is going to be very familiar for most men, because I can imagine that every man listening and watching me is going to have a moment where they were upset as a little boy or a teenager, or maybe even this month as a man, and they went and cried in private. Most men struggle to cry with other people. Some men find it easier to cry with one of their brothers on the shoulder. Other men find it easier to cry with their girlfriend or a female friend, some with family. But most men will shed most of their tears in private, which is very distinct to women, who tend to be a lot more open about their tearfulness, namely because it wasn't punished from about the age of 4 going onwards. Some families are healthy. I'd say that 95% of men who are in adulthood right now, anyone over the age of, let's say, about 20 or so, probably had an experience between age 4, 5, 6, when suddenly their tears were no longer accepted. Suddenly there was a gender distinction between what little girls do and what little boys do, and it takes multiple years of subtle or maybe extreme punishments in the form of being berated, being told to pull yourself back together by an angry father figure or a teacher who scolds you at the front of the class for being upset about a presentation or forgetting your homework. They run deep, and the little boy's heart gets congealed, and we laugh at him or we punish him further, and men tend to toughen each other up that way, and by the time we get to adulthood, we are socialized and stoic. It's an oversimplification of the story, but most men have some version of that narrative to at least some degree, especially if you grew up in the 80s or the 90s, where it was also associated with these very outdated ideas about being gay or being girly or being feminine or being fruity. In the UK especially, when I was growing up, the word gay was used as an insult. Of course, now it's a very different time, but that particular moment of emotional confusion, that feeling of intense violence on the other side of the internal violence which is going on, puts the young man, the young boy, and the adult male in a lose-lose situation. It's healthy to cry, but most situations that we'll find ourselves in, unless it's professional therapeutic space with a trained professional or a very conscious partner or friend, most situations will have some form of violence, or at the very least will open up. And then because we didn't get exactly what we needed, because we don't necessarily know exactly what we need on the other side of our sharing, we might get shame. One of the reasons why boys don't cry and boys don't open up is the deep shame pattern of not knowing what to do on the other end of sadness. Typically, male sadness expresses as an overlay of anger. Most men who have anger issues have several years of uncried tears, and most women who have sadness issues often have several years of unexpressed rage. It typically has an inverted element. When men are angry, they're actually sad, and when women are sad, they might actually be angry. We tend to hold each other's shadow in these ways, and it's obviously very dysfunctional, but what can we do about it? Suggestion for the video: how do we practically heal the male heart? Well, today, it's actually quite a personal moment because I cried today. I had a client session, and my client was sharing a moment of pain, a real moment of pain, a really, really difficult moment. I looked away and I felt the tears coming, and in that particular moment, it is not necessarily the healthiest move to fully sob the way I wanted to. I can contain it as a professional, but I also know the healthy limit of letting a few of those tears come through, and we bonded deeper, and the healing space got stronger, and that was a beautiful moment to share with them, because it was real, it was true. I didn't lose control, which is often the fear that men have, that if they truly open up their heart again, they're going to be met with a moment of pain. For example, their girlfriend comes back from some kind of social event and shares something terrible that happened to her, and you'll get so emotionally swept up that you'll lose your stoic grounding and you won't be able to contain her, you won't be the leader in the relationship, you won't know how to lead her through that pain point and bring yourself back to center, bring her to center, because she's in chaos in that moment. You need to step up as a leader. That's typically a very male thing to do, and we worry that if we open our heart and soften our heart, that that's somehow a weak place to be, and that that's going to be ineffective in terms of conflict resolution. It's a nuanced space. Sometimes it may be, but often shedding a tear, or maybe just one or two streams down the face, with a few deep breaths, and admitting, that really upsets me. I'm so sorry. Or I'm so sorry, I'm in pain. I don't know what to do. I'm scared. I'm really scared. I need some help right now. Can you help me? What do you think I should do? Those questions, with the right person, at the right time, will heal the wounds of fatherhood, school moments, and unconscious romantic relationships from many years ago. But if you're not courageous enough to take that opportunity to share in the first place, and you gulp it down, feel the pressure behind your eyes, take it right back down into your body, and you glaze over and say, no, I'm all fine. Yeah, it's a bit crappy, but I'm all fine. And you do that 20 times in a row. Don't be surprised when you also lose the ability to feel love and joy and ecstasy and be able to see a squirrel in the trees and light up with delight at the joyful springiness, or see two children having an interaction on the street and feel joy and warmth in your heart because you saw something beautiful, or even just a work of art, a piece of music, a sculpture. You will lose that ability if you don't know how to cry, because a human being congeals at both ends. You don't just repress the sadness, you also repress the light. It will mean many different things for many different men, depending on the situation, of how to go about the healing process of male tears. But the true undercurrent is to be honest about what you're feeling. You don't need the word vulnerable. If the word vulnerable has a charge, and it's something which it feels disvalidating for one reason or another, don't accept the invitation to be vulnerable, but do accept the invitation to be honest about your feelings. It's got more strength in it. It's got a more empowering narrative, which allows us as men to feel like we're still in control and conscious of our dissolution. It's a paradoxical statement, but we can be somewhat in control or somewhat influencing the chaotic dissolution, which then will allow us to release a tension that we don't need to hold on to. It's a bit of a language game, but I've also noticed in working with men one-to-one that when a man will cry in session with me, and afterwards it's that moment of, man, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cry, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm being a baby here. If I can catch that moment and say, you're being real with me, I'd be sad about this as well. In fact, I can feel the pain in my heart. I can't believe they did that to you. Especially if it's abuse in childhood. I match it. Can't believe they did that to you. I hate that happened to you. And I match it, and I fight the side of the inner child who's crying in that moment as the adult man who's in a session with me becomes validating, because it validates the wound of having tears as a child which were told to be thrown all the way from your heart, locked up in a cupboard and never spoken about again, from men who didn't know what to do with their own emotions, to be a man who knows what to do with my emotions and role model that moment. It's okay, Dad. It's okay. I get it. I felt that. I'm here with you. we'll all be more honest, because every man does have these feelings to one degree or another, and it is healthy to cry. We do need to be discerning about who we cry with. You need to have conscious conversations with girlfriends, for example, about, I know I'm going through sadness right now, and I think there's going to be some anger, and if you're prepared to see some of that anger, knowing that it's not towards you, I'm never going to hurt you, I'm never going to direct this at you, but there will be anger in the room, and I feel like I'm comfortable enough to let you into that place with me if you're willing to add in healing energy. And they say yes, that's relationship building. You can do it with a therapist, or you could do it with a friend, the exact same conversation. Use your discernment, use the expected, I'm going to fall apart for about 10-15 minutes here. Can you hold me in this? Do I trust you? And take that leap if it's the right moment. If you're holding on to something now, find the way to release. You can have the conversation. You can maintain some degree of control. And if, for the women who are listening to this, it seems pedantic, it seems like, well, why do you need all this conversation about control? Why can't you just feel? Why can't you just feel it? You don't trust your ability to just feel it if you were shouted at for crying as a child. So I'm speaking to the little boy inside of the men who are watching this who need something a little bit different. And that's what's missing from the mainstream narrative, which is why we have men who are taking their own lives in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, but more so than ever before. I hope this video's helped. Let me know in the comments what you felt, what you feel, and especially men who watch these videos who normally don't comment. This is the time to share some stories. We lurk in the shadows and read each other's stories, and rarely will we comment ourselves, but might be the time for it if you think it could be useful for another man to know. Leave it down below. I'll be reading them, I'll be responding, and in the meantime, there's the next video. I'll see you over there.